Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the world of John D. Rockefeller.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going beyond those robber baron headlines that you always hear about.
Yeah.
We really want to understand the man, the myth, the magnate.
The magnate.
And our guide for this deep dive is God's Gold.
Mm.
Now, this book,
Yes.
it doesn't just recount Rockefeller's life,
Right.
but really places it within the economic whirlwind of his time.
Absolutely.
I mean, get ready for some family secrets,
Oh, yeah.
early hustle,
Mm.
and the seeds of what would become, a very controversial empire.
Yeah, it's a fascinating lens, I think, to understand him,
Right.
not just as this caricature of wealth,
Mm-hmm.
but as a product of his circumstances. And I think that's something that God's Gold really digs into.
Yeah, I mean, let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Michigan Hill.
Right.
Not exactly where you picture an oil titan being raised.
Right. Very rural, very hard scrabble.
Yeah.
Eliza, his mother,
Okay.
really faced a lot of struggle there.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of biographies kind of gloss over that.
Yeah.
But God's Gold really makes the argument that it instilled a deep sense of both frugality,
Hmm.
but also ambition in young John D.
Almost like he had something to prove, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that ties into his father, Doc Rockefeller. I mean,
Yeah.
this book paints him as such a mysterious figure.
Almost deliberately elusive,
Right.
selling these traveling miracle cures.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not just odd family trivia.
Yeah.
I think this secrecy really impacted John D.
Mm-hmm.
If your dad's dealings are shady,
Right.
you learn to be discreet.
Yeah.
You learn to control the narrative.
Fascinating. Yeah. And maybe that fueled his obsession with planning. I
Mhm.
mean, even as a kid, we see him with this little blue bowl,
Yes.
saving every penny.
Meticulously.
Meticulously.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting contrast to like the risk-taking oil wildcatters that we usually imagine?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a key insight, I think, into Rockefeller's character.
Right.
He wasn't a gambler.
Mm-hmm.
He was a chess player.
Yeah.
And that bowl wasn't just about thrift.
Right.
It was about control.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing your resources down to the penny
Right.
lets you make moves that other people can't even see coming.
Wow. So imagine little John D. selling candy to his siblings for a profit.
Right.
A tiny Standard Oil in the making.
Yeah, exactly.
But then enters Laura Celestia Spellman,
Okay.
his future wife.
Yeah.
Talk about opposites attract.
Yeah, she's deeply religious from a
Okay.
very privileged background,
Right.
devoted to social causes.
Right.
John D., by then, already this rising businessman,
Yeah.
hyper-focused on his ventures and
Yeah.
God's Gold, kind of hints that this contrast wasn't just personal, but it really reflected the broader tensions of that era.
The Gilded Age in a nutshell, right?
Exactly.
All this material wealth, but these ethical questions swirling around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this kind of leads us to this book that supposedly blew young Rockefeller's mind,
Okay.
The Life and Letters of Amos Lawrence.
Yes.
Now, Amos Lawrence, a textile tycoon turned massive philanthropist,
Okay.
really sparked something in John D.
It did.
This idea that wealth wasn't just for hoarding,
Mhm.
but for wielding.
Right.
Almost like an early blueprint
Right.
for what Rockefeller's own philanthropy would become.
Right, exactly.
But before we get to that chapter,
yeah.
we got to see how he goes from produce peddling to petroleum powerhouse.
Right.
I'm already sensing this isn't your typical rags to riches story.
Not at all. And I think God's Gold sets the stage perfectly.
Yeah.
We've got this young man shaped by hardship, secretive by necessity,
Right.
and already displaying that strategic thinking that'll really define his empire.
So listeners, stay with us as we jump into John D. Rockefeller's first foray
Okay.
into the cutthroat world of oil.
Right.
You won't believe what happens next.
Let's do it.
Okay, so now we've got John D. Rockefeller, fresh off some early successes,
Right.
but the Civil War has just ended.
Yeah.
The country's in chaos. You
Yeah.
would think that this would be the time to lay low, right?
You would think so, but not for Rockefeller.
Right.
This is where I think God's Gold really reveals
Yeah.
his almost uncanny
Yeah.
ability to see opportunity where other people just saw risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so his first big venture
Okay.
in this chaotic landscape is produce.
Produce.
Yeah.
Okay.
He partners with Maurice B. Clark,
Okay.
and they really tackle these disrupted supply chains.
Okay.
meeting this huge demand for food
Right.
in this rapidly industrializing nation.
So even amid the turmoil, he's not just surviving.
Right.
He's thriving.
Exactly.
But God's Gold really emphasizes his meticulous planning.
yes,
It's almost like he had a crystal ball predicting these market shifts.
the book details how he analyzed everything.
Right.
Transportation costs, crop yields, even the weather. And it wasn't about luck for him.
Right.
It was about minimizing risk.
Mm,
You know, he famously said,
yeah.
I don't want a business where chance determines whether I make a profit or lose.
Mm.
So that control, that aversion to gambling, it's all there from the very
Yeah.
beginning.
Okay, but then comes the South Improvement Company. And let's be honest, this scheme is where things get a little morally murky.
Yeah, this is where God's Gold doesn't shy away from the controversy at all.
Yeah.
It really lays out the mechanics of the scheme.
Yeah.
How Rockefeller essentially manipulated the railroads into
Yes.
giving him these lower shipping rates,
Right.
which allowed him to undercut competitors
Yeah.
and just drive them out of business.
Yeah. I mean, people saw it as a blatant power grab,
Yeah.
but was it just about greed for Rockefeller? Or was there a larger strategy at play here?
Well, this is where I think understanding Rockefeller's vision is so crucial. He wasn't just interested in these short-term profits.
Right.
He saw this chaotic oil industry as ripe for consolidation.
Mm.
And it wasn't just about controlling the oil itself.
Okay.
He understood the power of refining.
So it's not just about getting it out of the ground. It's about controlling that entire process. From crude oil to the kerosene lamps on people's tables.
Yeah, he realized that whoever controlled refining
Right.
could dictate the price
Yeah.
and really squeeze out their rivals.
Interesting.
And God's Gold makes a fascinating point here.
Okay.
This strategy reveals Rockefeller's really deep understanding
Okay.
of this emerging industrial economy.
So he was one step ahead.
He was
Yeah.
recognizing that power of vertical integration
Right.
before most others even knew what it was.
Mm. And then we have this almost mythical showdown with the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Yeah.
The Empire Line Battle.
The Empire Line Battle, it really does sound like something out of a Western film.
It does.
It was this high-stakes game of chicken.
Okay.
You've got the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Yeah.
This massive, established player
Yeah.
tries to muscle into oil transportation.
Okay.
Rockefeller, still relatively new on the scene,
Right.
refuses to back down.
Wow.
He builds his own pipelines,
Wow.
undercuts their prices, even forms alliances with competing railroads.
So this wasn't just a business dispute.
No.
This was a war
It was a war for control.
for the future of the industry.
Exactly.
And he was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to win.
He was.
God's Gold really paints a picture of his ruthlessness here.
It does, but it also, I think, highlights
Oh.
the context of the era.
Right.
I mean, this was the Gilded Age.
Right.
An era of just rampant capitalism.
Yeah.
Fierce competition, very few regulations.
Mhm.
I mean, to succeed, Rockefeller had to play the game by its rules.
Right.
And he played it brilliantly.
And by the end of the Empire Line Battle,
Yeah.
Standard Oil's dominance was virtually assured.
It was.
But this victory, as we'll see, came at a cost.
It did.
The public, lawmakers, even other industrialists were
Yeah.
starting to take notice of Rockefeller's methods.
They were.
And a backlash was brewing.
And that backlash would take many forms.
Yeah.
From muckraking journalism
Right.
to landmark antitrust legislation.
Right.
But as we'll delve into next,
Yeah.
it also spurred Rockefeller's really incredible turn towards philanthropy,
Interesting.
a move that would further complicate his
Wow.
already complex legacy.
All right, so John D. Rockefeller, he's at the pinnacle of his power.
Yeah.
Standard Oil, this behemoth, controlling almost every aspect of the oil industry.
Right.
But how did he manage to actually consolidate
Right.
so much control?
Well, God's Gold does a really good job
Yeah.
explaining the structure of
Yeah.
the Standard Oil Trust.
Okay.
And it wasn't just one company. It was this web of companies,
Okay.
all controlled by a board of trustees
Right.
with, you guessed it, Rockefeller at the helm.
Of course. Yeah. So we can see why people are starting to get nervous, right?
Yeah.
It's the Gilded Age. Incredible wealth is being created,
Right.
but at what cost?
Exactly.
I mean, was this just the free market at work?
Yeah.
Or was there something, more sinister going on?
Well, this is where I think God's Gold really shines.
Okay.
It doesn't just recount the history.
Yeah.
It helps you understand the public's growing unease.
Okay.
People saw Standard Oil as this symbol of Unchecked corporate power,
Right.
crushing small businesses,
Yeah.
and holding consumers hostage with its pricing.
And into this powder keg steps Ida Tarbell, a
Right.
journalist who was about to become
Yeah.
Rockefeller's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, her expose on Standard Oil, it was explosive.
It was. It was a landmark
Yeah.
piece of investigative journalism. She meticulously documented Standard Oil's ruthless tactics,
Right.
the backroom deals, the intimidation, even espionage.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a bombshell that completely shattered
Yeah.
Rockefeller's carefully crafted public image.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
As all of this controversy is swirling around him, Rockefeller is also starting to give away massive amounts of money.
Yeah.
I mean, he was already donating to charities, to universities.
Right.
But it seems like his philanthropy really ramps up around this time.
This is crucial, I think, to understanding Rockefeller's complexity.
Okay.
Even as he's building this cutthroat empire,
Right.
he genuinely believed in using his wealth for good.
Okay.
And God's Gold argues that his early donations weren't just about image.
Right.
They reflected these deeply held religious beliefs
Okay.
and a growing sense of social responsibility.
So he wasn't just handing out cash randomly.
No, not at all.
Yeah. It seems like he was almost scientific about his giving.
Absolutely. God's Gold reveals
Yeah.
how he applied the same strategic thinking
Okay.
to his philanthropy that he did to his business. He researched organizations, meticulously assessed their impact,
Right.
and he really focused on initiatives
Okay.
that promised long-term solutions.
So he was a pioneer of strategic giving.
He was.
He wanted to maximize the impact of every dollar.
Exactly.
So while public opinion is turning against him,
Right.
and the government is starting to take notice of Standard Oil's power,
Yeah.
Rockefeller is building this whole other legacy.
He is.
This legacy of philanthropy that's still felt today.
Right.
It's almost like two sides of the same coin.
And it sets the stage for one of the most pivotal moments
Okay.
in American economic history.
Okay.
The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890.
Right. This was the government finally stepping in,
Yeah.
trying to break up monopolies like Standard Oil
Right.
and restore competition to the marketplace.
It's exactly.
But the book makes it clear that this wasn't some instant victory.
Yeah.
No, I mean, Standard Oil, with its vast resources and its army of lawyers, found ways to circumvent the law.
They did. And this is a key takeaway here.
Yeah.
The Sherman Act was a turning point, but it was just the beginning of a long struggle to regulate corporate power.
So Standard Oil, even under scrutiny, continued to thrive.
It did, thanks in part
Yeah.
to its incredibly talented,
Okay.
sometimes ruthless
Right.
team of executives.
The Standard Oil Gang, as the book calls them?
The Standard Oil gang, yeah.
One figure who really stands out is Henry H. Rogers, right?
Yeah, Henry H. Rogers, he's described as brilliant, cunning, but also completely loyal to Rockefeller.
And then there's the Northern Securities case in 1904.
Yes, this was a real showdown between the government and some of the biggest names in finance.
Right, including J.P. Morgan.
J.P. Morgan, exactly.
And this case was a huge win for the antitrust movement.
It was.
I mean, the Supreme Court ruled that Northern Securities, which was this massive railroad holding company, violated the Sherman Act.
They did.
It sent shockwaves through the corporate world.
It did.
I mean, it proved that even the most powerful trusts weren't invincible.
Right.
So by the early 1900s, Rockefeller's empire is facing its greatest challenge yet.
Right.
The public is outraged. The government is cracking down.
Yeah.
And even his health is starting to decline.
It is.
It seems like the walls are closing in.
But Rockefeller, he was a master of adaptation.
Right.
He'd already begun shifting his focus to philanthropy. And then in 1911, the unthinkable happened.
Okay.
The Supreme Court ordered the breakup of Standard Oil.
You would think that would be his downfall.
You would think so. But
Okay.
here's where the story takes another ironic turn.
Okay.
The breakup actually made Rockefeller even richer. The individual companies flourished, and the value of his stock holdings just skyrocketed.
So he loses the battle,
Yeah.
but wins the war.
In a sense, yes.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that his public image at this point
Right.
was deeply tarnished.
Okay.
The Ludlow Massacre of 1914,
Right.
where these striking coal miners
Yeah.
and their families were killed in a clash with company guards,
Yeah.
really cemented his reputation as this heartless industrialist.
Right. Although God's Gold does present evidence suggesting that Rockefeller wasn't directly involved in the incident and was horrified by the violence.
Exactly.
This is where his philanthropy takes on an even greater significance.
It does.
He poured millions into war relief efforts during World War I.
Right.
Funded medical research.
Yeah.
Continued to champion education reform.
And his wartime giving is particularly interesting.
Okay.
God's Gold suggests that it wasn't just about altruism. You know, Rockefeller saw the war as a threat to global stability, to the very economic order that he'd benefited from.
Right.
So his donations, in a way, were also about protecting his interests.
A complex mix of motives.
Exactly.
But there's no denying the lasting impact of his philanthropy.
No, absolutely not.
The Rockefeller Foundation, established in 1913, has literally changed the world.
It's a testament to his vision and his belief in the power of strategic giving.
Yeah.
I mean, the foundation has funded groundbreaking research in medicine, in agriculture, in public health, saving countless lives, improving living standards across the globe.
Okay, so we've covered the highs and lows.
We have.
The triumphs and the controversies.
The contradictions.
But as we wrap up this deep dive into John D. Rockefeller, what's the takeaway?
Yeah.
How should we remember this man who was both a ruthless tycoon and a visionary philanthropist?
Well, I think God's Gold leaves us with a really thought-provoking challenge.
Okay.
It encourages us to see Rockefeller not as a hero or a villain, but as a product of his time. A man driven by ambition, shaped by circumstance, and ultimately grappling with the complexities of wealth and power.
It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white.
It's not. And that even the most influential figures are full of contradictions.
He built an empire, amassed unimaginable wealth, but also helped to reshape philanthropy.
He did.
And advance the causes he believed in.
It's a legacy that continues to inspire debate and reflection.
Which is exactly what a good deep dive should do.
Exactly.
So as you reflect on John D. Rockefeller's life, ask yourself this. How would you navigate the moral dilemmas of immense wealth and power?
It's a question that remains relevant.
It does.
Even today.